The story begins with a simple truth. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes the entire course of a life. In a busy city where people rushed past one another, rarely stopping to notice, one young cleaner's quiet heart was about to rewrite her destiny. On a cold Monday morning, Amelia hurried across the pavement with her cleaning bag slung over her shoulder. She worked in one of the tallest office buildings in the city, scrubbing floors and dusting desks long before the CEOs and executives arrived in their luxury cars. Her shoes were worn, her jacket too thin for the weather, but she walked with determination. Every coin she earned mattered because she wasn't just living for herself. Back home in her tiny apartment, her younger brother Leo waited, struggling with a heart condition that drained the family's savings. Their father had passed away years ago, and their mother worked in a garment factory, her hands rough from endless stitching. Amelia was the glue that held them all together. That morning, as she reached the tall glass doors of the office building, she noticed a frail old woman struggling with a shopping bag just outside the bus stop. People rushed past her, eyes glued to their phones, pretending not to see. The bag had torn at the bottom and oranges rolled across the pavement. The old woman bent painfully, trying to pick them up. Amelia didn't hesitate. She dropped her bag and ran over. "Let me help you," she said gently, gathering the fruit before they rolled onto the road. The old woman looked up with tired eyes and a grateful smile. "Oh, bless you, child. These hands aren't what they used to be." Amelia picked up the torn bag, frowned at it, and offered, "Let me carry these for you." "Where are you heading?" The woman hesitated, glancing toward the bus stop. "Just a little way. I can manage." "No, please," Amelia interrupted softly. "You don't have to manage alone." The old woman chuckled at her stubbornness, and together they walked slowly down the street. Amelia adjusted her own schedule in her head, knowing she might be scolded for arriving late to work. But she couldn't walk away from someone in need. When they reached a quiet block, the old woman stopped outside a modest building. "This is me," she said. "Thank you, dear. You've done more than you know." Amelia placed the bag in her hands. "It's nothing. Take care of yourself." The woman's wrinkled hand brushed hers. "You have a good heart. The world needs more of that." Amelia smiled, waved, and ran back toward her job, unaware that this simple act had already placed her at the center of a story much bigger than she could imagine. Inside the office tower, her supervisor, Mrs. Clark, frowned as Amelia arrived breathless. "Late again, Amelia? You know the rules." "I'm sorry," Amelia explained quickly. "I was helping an old woman." She dropped her things. Mrs. Clark raised an eyebrow. "Excuses won't pay your bills. Get to work." Amelia lowered her head and went to mop the marble floor, silently praying she wouldn't lose this job. As the morning went on, the building filled with sharp-suited professionals carrying laptops, speaking in clipped tones. Amelia moved quietly around them, invisible, blending into the background like a shadow. She noticed everything but was noticed by no one. That same day, in the top office of the building, a man named Richard Donovan, the CEO of the entire company, prepared for an important board meeting. He was young for his position, barely in his 30s, but his intelligence and drive had built the company into one of the most powerful in the city. Few people knew much about his personal life, though whispers said he came from wealth. Most saw only the sharp suit, the calm authority, and the eyes that missed nothing. What Amelia couldn't possibly know was that the old woman she had helped earlier was Richard Donovan's mother, Eleanor. She often disguised herself in plain clothes and traveled quietly through the city, preferring to live humbly despite her son's success. She disliked bodyguards and limousines. That morning, Eleanor had felt weak, but she insisted on running errands herself. And when her bag split open, the world ignored her, until Amelia came. That evening, Eleanor sat in her son's penthouse, sipping tea as Richard returned home. He set down his briefcase and kissed her forehead. "How was your day, Mum?" She smiled softly. "Eventful. I met an angel disguised as a cleaner." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor told him everything, how she had struggled, how people ignored her, and how one young woman had dropped everything to help without hesitation. "Her kindness touched me, Richard. She didn't know who I was. She didn't expect anything in return. That's rare in this city." Richard listened carefully, intrigued. His mother rarely spoke so warmly about strangers. "Do you know her name?" he asked. Eleanor shook her head. "She was in a hurry. But she had such kind eyes. I won't forget them." Richard leaned back, thoughtful. The next morning, as he walked into his building, he spotted Amelia bent over, scrubbing the lobby floor. For a moment their eyes met. Something stirred in him, familiarity, though he didn't know why. And so, the paths of a poor cleaner and a billionaire CEO's mother had crossed. Neither Amelia nor Richard yet understood how deeply their lives were about to intertwine. The following days passed quietly, but Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about Amelia. Every time she remembered the girl's gentle hands scooping up her spilled oranges, or the way she insisted on helping despite being in a rush, her heart warmed. She had lived long enough to see how cold the world had become, how people passed one another like ghosts without compassion. But that young woman had been different. Meanwhile, Amelia's life carried on with its struggles. She worked double shifts, sometimes cleaning the office during the day and then scrubbing restaurants at night. Her body ached, but she kept pushing. Each morning she left a small lunch on the kitchen table for Leo, her younger brother, before heading to work. He always smiled when she returned home exhausted, even when she tried to hide her sore feet. One Friday morning, as Amelia was polishing the glass doors of the office lobby, she felt a presence behind her. She turned and froze. It was Richard Donovan, the CEO himself. She had only ever seen him from a distance, tall, sharply dressed, carrying himself with quiet authority. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but firm. Amelia nearly dropped her cloth. "Gee, good morning, sir." Richard studied her face for a moment. "You're new, aren't you?" She shook her head nervously. "No, sir. I've been here a while. I usually work in the early mornings before the staff arrive." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. There was something about her eyes, the way they carried both weariness and strength, that struck him. "What's your name?" "Amelia," she whispered. "Amelia," he repeated softly as though testing the sound. Then he gave a small smile and walked away. Amelia stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing. She couldn't believe the CEO had spoken to her. The other cleaners would never believe it. Later that day in his private office, Richard sat across from his mother. "I think I met the girl you told me about," he said. Eleanor's eyes lit up. "You did? What was she like?" "She was cleaning the lobby. Her name's Amelia." She seemed sincere. "Not many people look me in the eye when I speak to them, but she did." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "Yes, that sounds like her." Richard leaned back, thoughtful. "Why does this matter to you so much, Mum?" "Because kindness matters," Eleanor replied firmly. "We live in a world full of arrogance and greed. But that girl, without knowing who I was, gave me dignity when no one else would. If she can do that for a stranger, she has a rare soul. Don't you think that's worth noticing?" Richard had no reply, but the words stayed with him. The following week, Richard began paying more attention. He often found excuses to pass through the lobby when Amelia was working. He watched quietly as she bent to scrub tiles, her hair tied back, her movements brisk but graceful. She never complained, never dragged her feet. When a junior employee accidentally spilled coffee, she rushed to clean it with a smile, assuring them not to worry. One afternoon, he caught her in the corridor, struggling with a heavy mop bucket. Without thinking, he reached out. "Let me help." Amelia blinked in shock. "Oh no, sir, please. This is my job." "Even so," Richard said, lifting the bucket with ease, "doesn't mean you should carry all the weight alone." For a moment their eyes met, and Amelia felt something stir deep inside her chest. Confusion, warmth, maybe even admiration. She quickly looked away. "Thank you, sir." That night, as Amelia returned to her cramped apartment, she found Leo waiting for her with a grin. "Guess what? My teacher said if I keep doing well, I could qualify for a scholarship." Amelia hugged him tightly, tears stinging her eyes. "That's amazing, Leo. I'm so proud of you." What she didn't know was that her kindness had already begun to ripple outward. Richard spoke often with his mother about her, and Eleanor, determined to know more, asked her driver to discreetly follow Amelia home one evening. When Eleanor saw the crumbling apartment building, the flickering lights in the hallway, and Amelia carrying groceries for her little brother, her heart broke. The next morning, Eleanor told Richard. "She lives in poverty, Richard. That girl has nothing, yet she still finds it in her to give. Doesn't that tell you everything about her character?" Richard was silent for a long time, staring out of his office window. Finally, he said quietly, "Yes, it does." But Amelia remained completely unaware. To her, Richard was a distant figure, and Eleanor was just a frail old woman she had once helped on the street. She had no idea that both were watching her closely, that her life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The weeks that followed brought subtle shifts Amelia didn't quite understand. The CEO seemed to notice her more often than before, though he never treated her differently from anyone else. Sometimes she would catch him watching her quietly, as if he were studying something he couldn't quite figure out. It left her flustered, but she kept her head down and focused on her work. One chilly morning, Amelia was cleaning the lobby when she saw a young intern struggling to carry boxes stacked too high. The boy tripped, sending papers fluttering across the polished floor. Other employees passed by without so much as glancing at him, too absorbed in their phones or conversations. Amelia immediately rushed forward, kneeling to gather the scattered files. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I've got you." The intern flushed with embarrassment. "Thank you, miss. I thought I'd be fired if I lost these." Amelia smiled and handed him the last of the papers. "Everyone makes mistakes. Just breathe." What Amelia didn't realize was that Richard had been observing from the second-floor balcony. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Kindness matters." It wasn't just that Amelia had helped his mother once. It was that she lived her life with this quiet, steady compassion. Later that day, Richard called in his assistant. "I want a list of every cleaner working in this building, particularly one named Amelia." The assistant raised his eyebrows but complied. Soon, Richard had a file on his desk detailing Amelia's employment history, her modest wages, her long hours. He even saw her emergency contact, her younger brother Leo. His heart tightened. She was supporting a family on barely enough money to survive. That evening, when he returned home, Eleanor was waiting with her usual gentle expression. "You've been thinking about her, haven't you?" she asked knowingly. Richard sighed. "She's remarkable, Mum. But I can't just step into her life. She'd never trust my intentions." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes sharp despite her age. "Then don't step in as a billionaire. Step in as a man." The next morning, Richard acted on impulse. He went down to the lobby earlier than usual and found Amelia polishing the brass handles of the main door. "Good morning, Amelia," he greeted. She nearly dropped the cloth in surprise. "Oh, good morning, sir. Can I ask you something?" His tone was casual, far gentler than before. She blinked nervously. "Of course." He gestured toward the cafe across the street. "Would you have a coffee with me? Just a conversation." Amelia stared at him in disbelief. "With me? But I'm just a cleaner." Richard's gaze was steady. "You're Amelia. That's enough." Her cheeks warmed, but she shook her head. "I don't think that's a good idea, sir. People might misunderstand." Richard respected her hesitation. "Fair enough," he said softly, then gave her a smile before heading upstairs. But the seed had been planted. Amelia thought about it all day, confused and unsettled. Why would the CEO of a massive company want to talk to her, of all people? It made no sense. The following week, fate intervened. While Amelia was scrubbing the stairwell, her phone buzzed. It was Leo's school. Her heart sank as she answered. His condition had worsened during class, and they had rushed him to hospital. Panic surged through her. She grabbed her bag and begged her supervisor for time off, but Mrs. Clark only scowled. "We're short-staffed today. Can't someone else handle it?" "My brother's in the hospital," Amelia pleaded, her voice breaking. Mrs. Clark rolled her eyes. "Always an excuse with you. Go, but don't expect your job to wait." Amelia didn't care. She ran out of the building, tears stinging her eyes. What she didn't realize was that Richard had overheard the exchange. Without hesitation, he called his driver and ordered the car to the hospital. At the small, underfunded clinic, Amelia sat beside Leo's bed, clutching his hand. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. The doctor explained the need for surgery soon, but the cost was beyond anything Amelia could dream of. She broke down, burying her face in her hands. That's when the door opened and Richard stepped inside. Amelia's head shot up in shock. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. He walked over calmly. "I heard about your brother. Let me help." Her eyes widened with fear and pride. "No, I can't accept charity. You're my boss. This isn't right." Richard crouched beside her, his voice low and steady. "This isn't charity, Amelia. This is gratitude. You helped my mother when no one else would. You've shown kindness to people here who don't deserve it. Let me do this for you." Amelia's chest tightened. She wanted to refuse, but the sight of Leo's fragile body lying in the bed shattered her resolve. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why? Why me?" Richard looked at her with something that was not pity but respect. "Because you deserve it." And for the first time, Amelia felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. The following morning, Marco arrived at the office before anyone else. He sat at his small desk with the mop bucket pushed to the corner, staring out of the window as the city stirred awake. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the hardships, the endless nights working 2 jobs, the constant whispers about being just the cleaner. Yet, through it all, he had held on to his integrity, his kindness, and his quiet strength. He didn't know what would come next, but something in his heart told him his life was about to change. When the elevator doors opened, Elena stepped out with her son beside her. Marco jumped to his feet, startled. She greeted him warmly, almost like an old friend. Her son, tall and sharp in his tailored suit, smiled politely but with curiosity. Elena introduced Marco as the man who had helped her when she was in distress. The CEO shook Marco's hand firmly and said, "My mother doesn't speak of people lightly. If she says you're special, then you are." Word spread quickly through the office. Colleagues who had once ignored Marco now glanced at him with sudden respect, whispering amongst themselves. But Marco kept his humility, nodding politely, continuing his tasks as though nothing had changed. What they didn't know yet was that Elena's influence would change everything. That afternoon, the CEO called Marco into his office. Nervous, Marco wiped his hands on his uniform and stepped inside. The office was intimidating, walls of glass, shelves of books, a massive desk that seemed to swallow the space. The CEO gestured for him to sit. Marco hesitated but obeyed. "My mother told me something that struck me deeply," the CEO began. "She said that while the world is full of people with money and power, very few have compassion. You showed her kindness when you had nothing to gain. That's the type of person I want in my company." Marco blinked, unsure how to respond. "I only did what anyone should do," he said softly. The CEO shook his head. "No. Most would have walked away." He leaned forward. "I'd like to offer you an opportunity. Not as a cleaner. I want you to train with our management team. Learn the ropes. My mother believes in you and so do I." Tears pricked Marco's eyes, but he held them back. He thought of his late father who had always told him, "Son, dignity comes from how you treat others, not from what title you hold." He whispered a thank you, his voice breaking slightly. Days turned into weeks and Marco's life transformed. He traded his mop and bucket for books and training manuals. He sat in meetings, his once calloused hands now scribbling notes. It wasn't easy, many doubted him at first, mocking his background. But Marco didn't let their words crush him. He worked harder, asked questions, and slowly respect grew. Elena would occasionally visit, always with a warm smile. She reminded him that his kindness had been the seed for all this. The CEO too took a liking to him, guiding him patiently, challenging him to think bigger. Marco began to shine in ways he had never imagined. Months later, at a grand company event, Marco stood tall in a crisp suit. He was asked to give a speech about his journey. The room fell silent as he spoke, his voice steady and heartfelt. He didn't boast, didn't hide his past. Instead, he told them the truth, about being the cleaner who once went unnoticed, about helping a stranger in need without expecting anything, and about how that single act had changed his destiny. By the time he finished, the hall erupted with applause. Some had tears in their eyes. He wasn't just a story of success, he was living proof that kindness and humility could move mountains. As he stepped off the stage, Elena clasped his hand. "You see, Marco," she said, her voice trembling with pride, "sometimes the world needs to be reminded that the smallest acts of kindness can open the biggest doors." Marco smiled, a smile full of gratitude and quiet triumph. He knew life would continue to test him, but one thing was certain. He would never forget the power of compassion, nor would he ever stop being the same humble man who once carried a mop.